Imagine waking up tomorrow and you suddenly have the power to vote on every single rule in your life.
Like literally everything.
Literally everything. I mean,
Yeah.
your university's tuition rates, your city's property taxes, or, whether a massive new highway gets built right through your specific neighborhood.
Wow, okay. That's a lot of power.
Right. And you don't have to just cross your fingers and hope a politician actually keeps their campaign promises because you are the one making the call. There are no middlemen, no lobbyists whispering in a senator's ear, just you, your neighbors, and the ballot.
I mean, it sounds like the ultimate freedom, doesn't it?
It totally does on paper.
But, well, what if handing everyone the steering wheel actually causes a massive societal car crash?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, think about it like crowdsourcing the design of a commercial airplane. Everyone voting wants extra legroom, massive windows, free Wi-Fi, but like nobody in the crowd is actually doing the structural math to ensure the plane can fly.
Right. They just want the good stuff.
Exactly. What if pure democracy is actually just a recipe for exhaustion, gridlock, and ultimately mob rule?
Welcome to the missing lessons where we explain what school never did.
We hear the word democracy thrown around constantly, right?
Oh, all the time. It is in the news, on social media, and all our civic discussions, but we rarely actually talk about the mechanics of who holds the power.
Yeah, the actual nuts and bolts of it.
Exactly. So today, we are taking a deep dive into direct democracy. We're looking at exactly what happens when we cut out the politicians and just, well, let the people decide directly.
It is a concept that sounds perfectly egalitarian, but the physical reality of running a society this way involves so much friction.
It really does. Before we get into all those messy details, though, if you're enjoying the missing lessons, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with someone who might find it interesting. It helps us create more episodes and reach more curious minds.
So where do we even start with this?
Well, to truly understand how we could govern ourselves without politicians, we have to look at the original blueprint. We have to go way back to ancient Athens, so around 600 BC.
Ah, the classic starting point.
Right, this is where the whole concept was born. In Athens, citizens didn't elect representatives to go off to some capital city and make decisions for them.
Wait, so they just did it all themselves?
Yeah, they physically gathered on this rocky hill called the Phoenix. We're talking about massive assemblies of thousands of people just standing there.
That sounds incredibly chaotic.
It was. And they didn't just vote on basic laws. They debated foreign policy, military strategy, taxation, all of it directly.
That's a huge cognitive load for an average person.
It really is. They even acted as jurors in these massive courts with hundreds of people, and they specifically designed the juries to be so large that nobody could successfully bribe all of them.
Oh, that's actually pretty clever.
Yeah, and because of this setup, it's often held up as the purest form of democracy. The people literally were the government.
I hear that idealized version of Athens a lot, but well, doesn't that ignore the reality of who actually got to stand on that hill?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Because it sounds incredibly empowering until you actually look at the demographics.
Yeah.
Out of a population of hundreds of thousands, only about 40,000 men actually qualified to participate.
Exactly. It was a very exclusive club.
Right. If you were a woman, a foreigner, or an enslaved person, you had absolutely zero say in this so-called pure democracy.
That is a critical piece of context that history classes often just gloss over. We tend to sanitize Athens, presenting it as this flawless, egalitarian utopia.
When it really wasn't.
Not at all. But the core mechanic they engineered, citizens voting directly on the issues rather than electing a proxy, that is the framework we are dissecting today.
Because today, almost all of us live in an indirect or representative democracy.
Right. We elect people, like mayors, senators, presidents, and it's their full-time job to read the 1,000-page bills and make the daily legislative decisions for us.
Which, honestly, most of us don't have time to do.
Exactly. But direct democracy is about taking that power back. In the modern era, it relies on tools like referendums, where the public votes on a specific law proposed by the government.
Or popular initiatives.
Yes, exactly, where everyday citizens can actually draft and propose a law themselves if they gather enough signatures. The entire goal is just to remove the filter of the politician.
Have you ever felt like the person you voted for completely ignored what you actually wanted once they got into office?
I think literally everyone has felt that way at some point.
Right, like they compromised away the very thing you elected them to protect. That systemic frustration is exactly why we are seeing a massive resurgence in people looking for direct alternatives today.
Absolutely. And because of that feeling of being disconnected from the process, some places in the world actually still rely heavily on direct democracy.
But navigating that requires a massive amount of civic homework, doesn't it?
Oh, a ton. The most famous modern example is Switzerland.
Yeah.
They operate as a semi-direct democracy.
Semi-direct. What does that look like in practice?
Well, Swiss citizens don't just vote for a representative every few years and then just tune out of politics entirely. They actually vote about 4 times a year on national, regional, and local issues.
4 times a year. That's a lot of trips to the ballot box.
It is, and they aren't just voting on fluff or renaming post offices. They vote on major financial decisions, immigration policy, corporate taxation, and national infrastructure.
Wait, but if they are voting 4 times a year on highly complex issues like corporate tax rates, how does the average person even keep up?
It sounds impossible, right?
Yeah, like how does someone who works a full-time job and has a family even begin to understand what they're voting on?
That is where the mechanics of their system becomes super fascinating. Every registered voter in Switzerland receives this thick physical information booklet in the mail weeks before the vote.
Oh, like a study guide for the election.
Exactly like a study guide. This booklet details the pros and cons of every single issue on the ballot, and here is how they keep it balanced. The government is legally required to allow the opposing committees to write their own arguments directly into the booklet.
That's amazing. So the people who propose the law and the people fighting against it both get to make their case.
Right, side by side in the same book. It is heavily curated to ensure that before a citizen casts a vote, they have access to the arguments from both sides.
And totally free from the filter of an inflammatory social media algorithm, which is huge.
Huge. But, we don't even have to look all the way to Europe to see this in action. Right here in the United States, particularly in New England, there is a tradition called the Open Town Hall.
Oh, I've heard of those, like a real-life Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls.
Yes, exactly like that. In these local towns, usually once a year, the citizens literally gather in a school gymnasium or a community center. They are handed a document called a warrant, which is basically the agenda for the year.
And then they just vote on everything.
Yeah, they directly debate and vote on local budgets, school funding, zoning laws, and whether or not to buy a new fire truck. There is no city council making the choice behind closed doors. The people in the room make the law.
So it's like a giant corporate shareholder meeting.
That's a great analogy.
But instead of deciding on stock dividends, you're deciding whether your neighbor gets to build a shed or how much your property taxes are going to go up this year.
Right, which gets incredibly personal very quickly.
I can imagine. That requires a highly educated, thick-skinned, and deeply engaged public just to function without turning into a total shouting match.
It really does. To make it relatable for you listening, imagine if your university or your workplace operated this way.
Oh boy.
Seriously, instead of the dean or the CEO issuing a top-down mandate about remote work policies or tuition fees, every single student or worker gathers in an auditorium.
I feel like that would take weeks to sort out.
It would be chaos. You all debate the policy openly, someone makes a motion, and then you vote. If the majority says no more classes before 10:00 a.m. or everyone gets a 4-day work week, that is the new binding rule.
I mean, it sounds incredibly empowering.
It does, but it brings us to a massive question. If direct democracy gives everyone an equal voice, why doesn't every country or every large organization just use it?
The answer has to come down to math, time, and logistics.
Yeah. Bingo! This is the paradox of scale.
Right. Direct democracy works beautifully when you are looking at a small, cohesive group,
Yeah.
but the physical mechanics of it begin to break down when the numbers get too big.
It just does not scale well at all. Those New England town halls function remarkably well, but only up to a certain demographic threshold.
What's the threshold?
Historically, once a town hits about 20,000 to 40,000 people, the system collapses under its own weight. It just becomes physically and logistically impossible to get that many people in a room to agree on the nuances of a multi-million-dollar budget.
Yeah, the debate would literally take years.
Exactly. So they almost always switch to a representative system, electing a mayor or a city council to handle the daily grind of governance.
That makes sense. And then there is the sheer financial cost of doing this on a large scale.
Oh, the cost is staggering. Take the 2016 UK Brexit vote, for example, the referendum to leave the European Union. Just organizing that one single referendum cost over £142 million.
Wait, really? Over 142 million just for one vote.
Just for one vote. And I have to admit, I don't entirely get it at first glance. We crowdsource opinions online all the time.
Yeah, we vote on reality TV shows for free via an app on our phones in seconds.
Exactly. So why does a national referendum cost so much money to execute?
It comes down to the mechanics of security and verifiable trust.
Ah, okay. Break that down for us.
Well, when you vote for a singer on an app, it doesn't really matter if there's a glitch or if someone creates a bot to vote 1,000 times.
Right, the stakes are pretty low.
Exactly. But when you are voting on a policy that will alter the entire economic future of a nation, the security has to be absolutely flawless. You can't just use a website.
So what does that 142 million actually pay for?
It pays for tens of thousands of secure polling stations, the printing of millions of specialized ballot papers that can't be counterfeited, cryptography experts, massive public information campaigns.
Oh, wow. So it's a massive logistical operation.
Huge. And you have to hire thousands of temporary workers to physically verify identities and manually count pieces of paper. The chain of custody is incredibly expensive to maintain.
That makes total sense. You cannot spend 142 million pounds every time you need to pass a routine infrastructure budget.
It would bankrupt the country.
Right. And furthermore, think about how this applies to crisis management. If there is a sudden economic crash, a global pandemic, or a military conflict, a country cannot afford to wait around.
Yeah, you can't wait weeks or months to draft a policy, print information booklets, mail them out to millions of households, allow time for public debate, and then organize a secure nationwide vote.
Exactly. You need quick, decisive action. Direct democracy is, by its very design, notoriously slow and deliberate.
And we also have to address the reality of human bandwidth.
What do you mean by that?
Well, between juggling university, demanding job, family obligations, and just trying to survive, who actually has the time to read a 50-page booklet on complex economic policies every few months?
Very few people, realistically.
Doesn't this inevitably lead to participation fatigue?
It does, and the data completely backs that up. When people are asked to vote on every little administrative detail, voter turnout drops significantly. People just get exhausted by the sheer volume of information they are expected to process.
That totally makes sense.
But, what happens when people do show up, but they were driven by anger, fear, or some viral misinformation campaign?
Oh, that sounds dangerous.
It is. This is where political scientists point to a major vulnerability in direct democracy. It's the friction between majority rule and minority rights.
Ah, the tyranny of the majority.
Exactly. In a representative democracy, you have built-in guardrails. You have an elected legislature, a constitution, and a Supreme Court.
So those institutions act as like speed bumps.
Precisely. They intentionally slow down the legislative process so that cooler heads can prevail and to ensure that a new law doesn't violate someone's fundamental rights.
But in a pure direct democracy, there are no speed bumps.
None. If 51% of the population gets swept up in a moment of panic and decides they don't like a specific minority group, they can simply vote to strip away that group's rights. The majority rules, period.
It completely removes the political filters.
It really does.
Because if you crowdsource the law, you are also crowdsourcing human emotion, which can be incredibly volatile during times of stress or economic hardship.
And history shows us that illiberal regimes actually understand this vulnerability perfectly.
How so? Like, how do they use it?
Well, if an authoritarian leader wants to pass a law that vastly expands their own power, but they know the constitutional courts or the parliament will block it, they bypass those institutions entirely.
They just take the vote straight to the people.
Yes, in the form of a plebiscite. And here's how the manipulation works. They bundle the questions. They will tie the power grab to a super popular populist policy, like giving out a massive tax rebate, and wrap it all in emotional, fear-based slogans.
Wow, so they weaponize the direct democratic process to consolidate their own power.
Exactly. They bypass all legal checks and balances while claiming they are simply listening to the will of the people.
Which highlights a deeply ironic flaw, doesn't it?
In what way?
Well, a tool that is explicitly meant to give power back to everyday people can be so easily hijacked by lobbyists, propagandists, or state media who have unlimited funds to run flashy ad campaigns.
That is the tragic irony of it.
Right? If you have the capital to control the narrative and flood the zone with messaging, you effectively control the vote.
That is the ultimate vulnerability we have to grapple with. If you can buy the best marketing, you can often buy the law.
But despite all these structural flaws, the hunger for direct democracy is actually growing right now across the globe, isn't it?
It really is, and it says a lot about the future of our society and our relationship with authority. Take the Yellow Vests protests in France a few years ago.
Right, that was a massive movement.
Huge. Hundreds of thousands of everyday workers took to the streets, and one of their main cohesive demands was the creation of local citizen assemblies. They wanted direct, binding democratic control over their laws.
Because they just didn't trust the system anymore.
Exactly. It revealed a deep, systemic lack of trust in modern political and economic elites. People are just tired of representative systems that feel entirely disconnected from their daily struggles.
Systems where politicians seem way more responsive to wealthy corporate donors than to the actual people who elected them.
Yep. When the proxy fails, people want the steering wheel back.
It is a profound reaction to feeling powerless.
Hmm.
People just want to guarantee that their voice actually translates into tangible action.
Rather than just evaporating into an empty campaign promise once election season is over.
So, given all this, how can our listeners navigate this?
That's the big question. Because whether it is a local ballot initiative, a union vote at your workplace, or a national referendum, you are going to see more calls for direct voting in your lifetime.
So how can you become a better, more powerful participant in this process?
First, you have to train yourself to look past the catchy slogans. When you are faced with a binary yes or no choice on a ballot, you must ask yourself the critical questions.
Like, who wrote the actual text of the question?
Exactly. Who funded the multi-million-dollar ad campaign pushing me to vote yes? What is their underlying financial or political interest? Never vote on a billboard slogan. Vote on the actual legal text of the policy.
That's great advice. What else?
Second, start local. The most effective, purest form of direct democracy happens right in your own backyard. Get involved in your university's student union, your local community board, or your neighborhood zoning council.
Because that is where your single vote has the most mathematical power.
Yes, that's where the scale is actually manageable and where you can see the immediate physical results of your decisions in your daily life.
It really demands a level of active citizenship.
It's hard work.
It is. I mean, what would you do in a high-stakes situation? Would you vote for a policy that benefits you personally? Like maybe it lowers your taxes or increases your property value, even if you knew it might negatively impact a marginalized group.
Or underfunded public services in your city. That is the real uncomfortable test of direct democracy.
Right. It demands a level of empathy, foresight, and self-education that is incredibly difficult to maintain consistently across an entire population.
That is the heavy, undeniable burden of ruling yourself. You cannot blame a politician when you are the one holding the pen.
Here's a question for you. If you could put one single issue to a direct, nationwide binding vote tomorrow, what would it be and why? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
We really want to hear how you would use this power.
Definitely.
So, to wrap this all up, direct democracy is a profoundly powerful tool. It offers ultimate transparency, equal voting weight, and true, unfiltered citizen engagement.
It forces us to actually talk to our neighbors, debate ideas openly, and build consensus.
But we cannot ignore the physical and logistical reality. It is slow, it is incredibly expensive to run securely, and it's highly vulnerable to mass hysteria, participation fatigue, and elite manipulation.
It just doesn't scale well for massive populations.
It doesn't. And without strict constitutional safeguards, it can easily slide from the will of the people right into the tyranny of the majority.
Direct democracy teaches us that having a voice isn't just a right. It's a massive, exhausting responsibility.
It really is.
If we demand the power to make the rules, we also have to put in the grueling work of educating ourselves on the nuances of every single issue. Otherwise, we're just handing our power over to whoever has the best marketing budget.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. As artificial intelligence gets better at instantly summarizing complex 1,000-page laws into plain English, and as secure digital identities eventually solve the problem of voting fraud,
That's an interesting angle.
could technology completely solve the time and math problem of direct democracy in our lifetime?
That would change everything.
It would. But if we build a system where millions of people can securely debate and vote on laws from their phones in real time, are we actually ready to govern ourselves?
That's the real question.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Missing Lessons, don't forget to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us continue exploring the topics school never taught us. Until next time, keep questioning who wrote the rules.